Over the last few months, I messaged 10 YouTubers and asked them for one recommendation each, but it had to be something I hadn't read yet. The only rule was simple. I had to read at least 2 volumes, or the page count equivalent, and afterward decide honestly whether I'll keep reading or not. So, let's see who actually knows my taste. Starting with Maison and the Man-Eaten Apartment, recommended by Sufferents. This one is a weird one. Written by Ku Tanaka and drawn by Akira, the manga drops you straight into a bizarre futuristic apocalypse. Earth has 1 second left before it's swallowed by the sun, and the only place still living is a single apartment building where time stretches almost infinitely. 1 real-world second becomes decades or centuries inside. Maison, our protagonist, is born within the apartment and assigned the role of the landlord from birth. The duties of the landlord are vague, supposedly about bettering the well-being of the residents, though no one explains what that actually means and it's a bit unclear. What is clear is that the apartment itself isn't a safe place to exist. Throughout the first chapter, you keep hearing warnings about the apartment man, a horrific creature people whisper about in fear. When he inevitably appears, he looks unreal, a tall skeletal being that put the fear of God in anyone. And those he touches are recycled, devoured by the building. One of those unfortunate victims is Maison's best friend, Bertie, who saw something he shouldn't have and paid the price. It's disturbingly bleak, and the plot pushes forward with Maison desperate for answers: who the apartment man is, why Bertie was killed, what her role as a landlord even means. Each chapter unravels more of the apartment's mysteries, things hidden from the public and damning to know about. The art hits a sweet spot between Dorohedoro's grime and the Promised Neverland's warped perspective work. The environmental design has a great sense of scale. Narrow hallways curl into impossible angles, floors warp within another, and the architecture looks like a vertical bunker, which reminds me of the series Silo. Maison and the Man-Eaten Apartment is brazenly weird. The more you read, the more you unravel, then what you unravel just leads to more questions and intrigue. I'm definitely here for the ride and the bonkers premise, but will I keep reading? Yeah, actually. I'm interested in knowing where the story will lead, but I think it's best read in binges because I'm too impatient to read it bi-weekly. So, super happy with Sufferents' recommendation here. Maison and the Man-Eaten Apartment definitely won me over. Next up was Opus, chosen by my friend Joe over at Beyond Ghibli. Since Satoshi Kon started in manga before moving into directing anime, you can actually see the beginnings of his directorial flair in Opus, the way scenes shift and treat panels like camera shots. You can trace it straight into Perfect Blue or Paprika, and that alone had me so excited to read this story. From the very first chapter, Kon flexes his flair for blending fiction and reality. A dramatic manga scene suddenly cuts to the actual storyboard pages the main character is presenting to his editor for approval. It's a match cut on paper, the kind of visual sleight of hand Kon was known for, executed in ink and paneling instead of film. Opus's main character, Chikara Nagai, is a manga author finishing his series with an unorthodox killer twist, literally killing one of the leads. And just when you think the story will be a commentary towards audiences' expectations versus a creator's vision, Kon yanks it in a different direction. Because out of nowhere, Nagai is pulled into his own world, straight into the story he created, meeting characters he designed and plotlines he orchestrated up close. But in tumbling into his own world, Nagai accidentally interferes with the story's final scene. The main character, Lin, who was supposed to die in a heroic sacrifice, saving Satoko and killing the villain, doesn't die at all. And what's worse, Lin discovers the manga storyboard of his death scene and refuses to accept it. And so he rebels against Nagai, rebels against the author. In Opus, Kon leans fully into metafiction, creator versus creation. Nagai knows the world because he made it, yet by entering it, he destroys its logic. The characters have to confront the idea that their histories and their pain were manufactured for someone else's entertainment. It's like waking up one morning and learning you're just an NPC in a game. Nagai becomes a fugitive in his own story, hunted by the people he created, and that premise alone had me hooked. The art feels unmistakably Kon, Characters have that softness in their expressions, and scenes have dreamlike sequences and shape-shifting visuals, all the while the panelling hits you with that cinematic rhythm. Exactly what I miss about Satoshi Kon's work. So will I continue? 100%. There's debate about the ending, especially with the posthumous chapter, but it's an experience I want for myself and to decide how I feel about the manga's ending. The Nito Exorcists was recommended to me by the masked man, and we tend to overlap in taste, so I trusted this one going in. The premise is simple: 2 exorcists, Uruka and Gotsuji, hunt down evil spirits. You've definitely heard that setup before, and I'm by no means saying this story is anything unique, but that doesn't mean it isn't enjoyable. In this world, evil spirits are born from vengeance, literal manifestations of hatred that harm and kill people, with yearly death counts in the tens of thousands. As some of you know, I eat up a good haunts the narrative trope, and both Uruka and Gotsuji were both shaped and haunted by the same tragedy: the death of Uruka's older sister, who was killed by an evil spirit known as Doppelganger. They represent different sides of grief. Uruka pushes forward by trying to speedrun adulthood. She drinks, smokes, goes clubbing, wears this weird bunny outfit, anything to escape the expectations her family legacy placed on her, and to distract herself from the reality of her sister's murder. Gotsuji, on the other hand, internalizes everything, his anger simmering coldly into a quiet want for revenge. His respect for the dead, especially those killed by spirits, guides his lust for retribution. The art style carries a scratchy intensity that immediately reminds me of Jujutsu Kaisen, but the faces have their own identity, expressive and strange in a way that just works. The spirits themselves swing between goofy and genuinely grotesque, a contrast that confused me at first until the series explains: the stronger a spirit becomes, the more complex its body forms. I don't think I've seen power scaling visualised through the complexity of design before in that sense, so it's a clever touch. It does make me wonder how that will affect Hirami Ichikawa over time, because those gruesome spirit designs look amazing, but I know they're an absolute pain to draw, especially as stronger spirits start appearing more frequently. But the ultimate question is, will I keep reading the Nito Exorcists? I think so. Not weekly, but in binges. The art style alone is worth keeping up to date with the series, like genuinely. There's really clever and experimental compositions or use of panelling that gives the series a feeling of ambition from an artist's perspective. So yeah, nice recommendation, Mask. Glad I caught up with this one, as I can see it pulling in a much larger audience down the line. Touring After the Apocalypse was recommended by LyddieMoon, and I was excited for this one because our tastes are probably the closest on the list. I love a good apocalyptic story, or post-apocalyptic in this case, and strangely, girls navigating a post-apocalyptic world has become its own little niche in anime manga. I'm not complaining, I love stories like Girls' Last Tour or The Colour of the End, but this story just happens to be much more light-hearted than the others. There's a melancholic fascination in seeing the world quiet, seeing tourist hotspots with no people or shops frozen in time. Okay, maybe I'm just listing things that sound super appealing to me personally, but they're not destroyed, per se, just abandoned. And Touring After the Apocalypse captures that feeling perfectly. Airi and Yoko wander an empty Japan, following the trail of places Yoko's sister once visited, pieced together from the photos she posted online before everything collapsed, on an app called Touringgram. Not gonna lie, the twist that Airi is an android caught me totally off guard. I thought we were gonna get the younger nerdy girl who knows everything trope, but nope, she's just an android, which is why she knows everything and makes sense of the girls' dynamic. One girl grieving the world that was and trying to find hope in the memories of her sister, and the other quietly curious about the world that's left behind and being the companion that keeps Yoko in check and alive. There's not much lore, the series is more so built around quiet observation. Sometimes you get little flickers of the past, seeing flashbacks of family and friends, just long enough to remind you of how much was lost. But most of the time, it's just the girls travelling on a bike in the ruins. Coastlines are swallowed by the sea, cities are submerged, cars are left abandoned, trains are half buried under moss. So you can piece together your own theory of how the world ended, but mine leans towards climate collapse, which, Not to sound like a downer, but is pretty inevitable for us at this rate. But will I continue reading this series? Not right now. I think I'll wait until it's finished and binge it in a single cozy afternoon. Its episodic travelogue vibes are nice, and there's breadcrumbs of world building, but reading it monthly wouldn't be as satisfying as a binge, I think, for a story like this. But I still enjoyed it quite a lot, so thanks LyddieMoon for the rec. Hope You're Happy Lemon was recommended by TazerLad, and I'll be honest, before even starting the series, the volume covers and colour illustrations were just so gorgeous that it made me feel more positive going in, if not for the art alone. The series opens with Nishikawa Lemon confessing to cheating on her boyfriend, Akiyoshi Sunao, with multiple guys, and then dumping him like it's nothing. Now, before anyone gets the pitchforks out, she lied. She didn't cheat, not that Sunao knows that. But the emotional fallout is still real, and Sunao spends the next 3 years pretty much traumatised by it. Even false cheating has consequences. It wrecks self-esteem, ruins trust, triggers anxiety, depression, even PTSD-like symptoms. They were teens, but the damage was messed up. 3 years later, they bump into each other again, and Lemon feels like a different person entirely. She's bubbly, breezy, and doesn't seem to give a toss about the fact that she broke this man's heart. Luckily, Sunao has moved on, and now has a crush on Kogahara, a sweetheart character I would defend with my whole life. But right when you think you're about to get an average romance, the manga throws in a twist. For whatever reason, suddenly Lemon and Sunao swap bodies. Every night. And to make it worse, Lemon's best friend and roommate is Kogahara, meaning Sunao's ex is besties with the girl he likes. On top of your average body swap chaos, the first few volumes make it clear that Lemon still likes Sunao, Sunao meanwhile has feelings for Kogahara, and Kogahara responds to the version of Sunao that Lemon is piloting. Because to me, Sunao is high-key useless without Lemon's knowledge of her bestie, which is why I'm team Lemon Kogahara. Sorry guys, you can't just give me two girls with great chemistry living together and not expect me to root for the Yuri ending. Will I continue? Probably not. It isn't bad, it's just too straight and dramatic for my taste. I adore the girls, but I'm not invested enough to keep reading. Though I'll absolutely keep tabs on Mizuki Kishikawa's future projects because their art style really is stunning. Akira was recommended by Super Eyepatch Wolf, who is one of the few Teppu glazers I know, so of course I trusted their pick. I watched the film over a decade ago, which almost feels like cheating in terms of knowing the plot, but reading the manga now made me realise just how much I actually missed. The anime is a juggernaut of a landmark within the anime sphere, but man, the manga hits just as hard, and it's one of the reasons that the 35th anniversary box set has been whispering to me for years, like Gollum trying to get me to buy it. I've read Domo, A Child's Dream, so I came in knowing Otomo's visual style, but that didn't stop Akira from blowing me away. The art is absurd. It's cyberpunk without neon romanticism, with cracked concrete, rusted vents, and brutalist scaffolding all rendered in painstaking detail. Every stain on a tenement wall, every crushed steel beam, every shattered window feels intentional. Characters look like they're navigating debris more than streets, and the faces, distinctly Otomo, are soft, expressive, and human in a world that's anything but. Though I will say he sure does love using action lines, the manga is absolutely stuffed with them. I'm not sure if this is an unpopular opinion, but I love the setting, I love the themes, and I love the art, but the characterization hits flatter for me on the page. There's a lot of reactive dialogue, exposition, and maybe pacing issues for me. Tetsuo and Kaneda are practically trying to kill each other immediately. And yes, there are implied reasons, but the anime gives their conflict a cleaner emotional anchor by pacing things differently. In the manga, it just explodes faster and messier with way less groundwork, so the feud reads colder to me. But in the opposite effect, I was shocked by how much was left out of the anime that I enjoyed seeing expanded in the manga. As many details or characters were missing or demoted to cameo roles in the anime. But I guess Akira isn't about tidy motivations or emotional monologues, because in this story, character is expressed through action, escalation, and the psychological terrors and consequences of unchecked power or societal disillusionment. The city shapes them more than any individual decision, in my opinion. With those thoughts, I'll definitely keep reading though. The art, world building, and sheer confidence of the storytelling are more than enough to keep me hooked. So I'm glad John gave me the push to finally read this. Next up is Mad by Yusuke Otori, which was recommended by Alex. And you know what? Can't even lie, this pick was an absolute banger. The story opens with xenomorph-looking creatures crashing onto a planet and wiping out everything in sight. They reproduce at terrifying speed, and their brutality is immediate. I love alien horror, and this gives me Alien meets A Quiet Place meets Edge of Tomorrow. Just a messy, grim sci-fi tale that sinks its teeth in right away. It scratches an itch I didn't realise I'd been waiting for. We follow John, a farmer turned traumatised survivor, travelling with his younger sister. He's exhausted, suicidal, and very much at the end of his rope. And honestly, I'd be the exact same. I'd be in a corner weeping, sobbing, throwing up, hair falling out. I'm not about to live this life. Anyways, humanity is scattered, starving, and constantly hunted. Chapter 1 plays into emotional gut punches immediately. The new survivor group John joins gets obliterated by landmines and an incoming swarm of aliens, who tear them apart, rip them open, beating them with their tails and launching them like a ragdoll. John only survives because a heavily armed strike force shows up Myst-style after everyone else is already dead. He's dragged to a stronghold called Jericho, a so-called safe haven, a palace to finally breathe. But only naturally, the moment you meet military saviours in apocalyptic stories, things only get more bleak and disturbing. Mad is all about survival, and clinging on to even the smallest strings of hope, and living on to keep the memories of loved ones who've passed. It basically feels like a Hollywood movie turned into a manga in the most positive and respectful way possible. Even the volume covers look like film posters in that graphic, almost cinematic way they're composed. In the manga itself, the art style is scratchy and simple, which I never hold against a Jump series, especially bi-weeklies. Though I will say, Otori sometimes draws eyes as two dots and a line that caught me off guard a few times, but it just made me laugh. It's unintentionally humorous in scenes that aren't supposed to be. Mad genuinely reads like prestige sci-fi horror. There's tense stakes and mysteries unravelling more horrors. It's probably my favourite recommendation on the whole list, and I'll absolutely be keeping up with every new update. Applause to Alex for this one. Mad is an underrated gem. You and I Are Polar Opposites was recommended by Ninjaristic, and yes, this is another Jump Plus series. I swear this is the last one. But it also has an anime coming out very soon, so I was excited to jump in. The title gives it away, but the opposites dynamic here actually works. Suzuki is loud, emotional, and social in the way a lot of teenage girls are. Not rude or anything, just someone who fills space naturally. Tani, however, is reserved, blunt in a polite way, but not cold. Maybe it's because my school was full of loud boys, but I've always preferred this kind of male character who's quiet, attentive, and direct. And the manga makes it clear that Suzuki isn't annoying him when she badgers him daily. He says outright that he's fine with her talking to him, or at him more accurately. I'm just grateful it wasn't a bully falling for the victim type of story, because I've never been a fan of those. Things move pretty quickly in the first chapter. Suzuki accidentally brushes Tani's hand, and instead of panicking or doing the usual rom-com stuttering, he just takes her hand, calm and confident. And that directness and honesty is refreshing. Suzuki later stands up in class and openly admits that she likes him. No, we have to hide or it'll ruin my image nonsense. These two are awkward, yes, but they communicate like actual teenagers, read like actual teenagers. The humour lands pretty often as well. I was genuinely laughing out loud each chapter, like Tani googling girlfriend conversation is the most painfully accurate teenage moment I've seen in ages. He reads neurodivergent to me, and the manga never treats that as a flaw. He's literal, direct, and that honesty makes everything easier instead of harder. You and I Are Polar Opposites isn't reinventing romance. As a couple, they're both adorable, if you will, and whilst each chapter felt familiar to what I've read before, it still kept my attention. I tore through it without noticing and read way past volume 2 because it's nicely engaging and fun. I think if you're after an upbeat romance without much unnecessary drama, this is a great pick, so thanks Ninja for a new favourite. Spirit Circle was recommended by Mother's Basement, and this manga has been on my radar for a while. Satoshi Mizukami is one of those names you hear constantly due to Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer and Sengoku Yoko, but Spirit Circle is the one people tend to swear by. It opens by throwing you straight into conflict in medias res style, dropping you into a dramatic battle before slingshotting you 3 months into the past to explain how you got there. Our protagonist, Okeya Futa, is your average 14-year-old boy with one tiny exception. He sees ghosts when no one else can. So when a girl named Ishigami Koko transfers into his class with a scar carved across her forehead and a strange man in historical clothing shadowing her, Futa questions it, but also kinda just accepts it because ghosts don't faze him. Which is funny because later when Koko suddenly accuses him of being her reincarnated mortal enemy, that's the thing he thinks is unrealistic. Like, sir, you see ghosts, how is reincarnation puzzling to you? Once the premise kicks in, it goes full throttle. Futa begins reliving former lives through dreams and fragments of memory. Each one differs, but Koko is always there as a different rendition, because they're spiritually tethered. But present Koko is openly hostile, furious at one of his past incarnations. And when the manga finally reveals why, it's brutal. Futa died trying to stop a ritual sacrifice of a girl he cared about, and Koko was the one who killed him for interfering. The series then spirals through reincarnations, different eras, different circumstances, all feeding into their present conflict. There is some dated fanservice and dialogue that made me roll my eyes, but the narrative structurally works. The time jumps are easy to follow, and Mizukami uses the premise to explore identity, trauma, and the emotional cost of carrying hundreds of lifetimes. It's messy and painful, full of lingering betrayal, and I'm interested to see how the cycle finally ends. So yes, I will be continuing this. Colette Decides to Die was recommended by the bestie Colleen's MangaRex, and of course they delivered the shoujo title of the lineup. Also they have a dedicated video on Colette which I'd recommend watching. Colette is a village doctor, the only one her community has, and she is chronically overworked in a way that makes the NHS look like a dream job. Okay, maybe not quite that far. She patches up injuries, treats illnesses, delivers children, deals with every physical issue under the sun, all by herself. And fair enough to her, one day, she decides to jump into a well and end it. I know I shouldn't laugh, people do genuinely do this, but it's also the most relatable burnout arc I've seen in manga. Everyone in hospitality and retail felt that jump in their bones. But instead of dying, she falls into the underworld, and hilariously, her first reaction isn't fear, it's relief. If she's dead, she doesn't have to work anymore. Like, girl, I get it, where's my invitation? Except the underworld has a problem. Hades, the literal ruler of the dead, has a mysterious ailment. They have no apothecary, no staff, and suddenly, even in death, Colette gets assigned a patient. Turns out Hades is essentially allergic to sunlight after spending centuries underground. He doesn't tell anyone because he doesn't want to appear weak. What Colette recognises in Hades, however, the work, responsibility, isolation, mirrors her own struggles. She spent her life tending to others, but never herself. The manga handles that theme gently and also touches on this idea of passive influence. You don't need to see your impact for it to exist. Your presence helps more people than you'll ever realise. The tone is thoughtful but light and decorated with beautiful art throughout. The servants are goofy, the souls in limbo have their own stories, and the setting oscillates between the surface world and the underworld in a way that feels surprisingly healing. Though I will say, technically Colette just ends up doing overtime now that she's treating two worlds, but I digress. To Colleen's delight, I will keep reading this one. I enjoyed it quite a bit actually. It might be the last pick in this lineup, but definitely not the least. Hey guys, thanks for watching to the end of the video. As always, I would normally record on my camera, but I have so many Christmas presents on the floor that I literally can't put my tripod down. So you're gonna have to accept webcam me for this outro. I just want to thank absolutely everyone for watching this video and supporting me throughout this entire year. I cannot be grateful enough for the people who show up to watch my videos, who comment, who share, who just anything really. It means the absolute world to me that I'm able to do what I do and have so much fun with it. So I just want to give a massive thank you to you guys, and hopefully that you enjoyed this kind of surprise video, because I didn't really announce it other than to people on Patreon, who I am also massively grateful towards, as well as the people on my YouTube memberships. Bit of a variety of manga that was suggested in this video, but I had genuinely actually a blast going through manga that I may not have even known about or read in general, so it was nice to dip my toes into areas that I'm not familiar with so much. So thank you to all the creators who gave me their recommendations, and I'll be sure to put all the channels, links and everything in the description below. Absolute massive thank you, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.